All right. Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and continue with the open session portion of the special board meeting of District 205. For those of you who are just joining us, we actually convened at 5 o'clock for a closed session, and so we have already moved into open session, so we're going to just go ahead and start with the meeting. For the record, Allison, if you want to go ahead and just call roll.
Hennigan?
Here.
Lyons?
Yes.
Phelps?
Here.
Rodriguez? Here. Sharpie?
Here.
Walters?
Here.
Cervantes?
Here. Okay. First up, do I have a motion to consider approval of changing account signatories?
Second.
Are any questions from board members regarding this action?
So we had bills payable executive assistant who retired, and so we needed to get some different signatories on there. So we needed to change Susan Hayes out, and we were putting, who did we? Donna Palmer. Oh, we ended up putting Donna on there, didn't we? So we're changing Donna Palmer for Susan Hayes.
Because I think the board secretary is changed.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're still on there, but we need to have a second. So that's all it is.
Any other additional questions? Allison?
Lyons?
Yes.
Phelps?
Yes.
Rodriguez? Aye. Sharpie?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Hennigan?
Aye.
Next up, do I have a motion to consider approval of the food service van?
So moved.
Mrs. Ham, did you want to give an update on this?
So you approved the food service purchase of the van at the regular board meeting in January. By the time we called in to get the van, not only was it not available, but they're no longer taking orders for the rest of the year due to COVID constrictions. So then we called Yem Ford, and we're going, unfortunately, it's the highest bid, but it's the only one that met the bid specs. So instead of Yem Chevrolet, we're going with Yem Ford, and unfortunately the highest bid due to the COVID restrictions. So
The difference wasn't that great, though, was it?
$1,414.
And 95 cents.
But there's a $3,200 difference between their two quotes. So, but the one liftgate did not meet our requirements.
Okay. Any questions? Allison?
Phelps?
Yes.
Rodriguez? Aye. Sharpie?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Hennigan?
Aye.
Lyons?
Yes.
Okay, now for the part I'm sure everybody's actually waiting for. Presentation of the in-person learning plan. Dr. Asplin.
Thank you. So I'm going to call up a few people here to present here in a little bit, but I want to start off with very clearly stating what our recommendation is going to be, and then we'll come back and we'll get to the why. Okay. So are we back?
What'd you do, Steve?
Everybody at home just went, what in the what? So, yeah, that was bad. All right, so I'm sure all the people watching at home are anxiously awaiting what the recommendation would be. So we put out a plan at the last board meeting where we said we wanted to have students come back starting February 1st, and it's a hybrid plan where half the students who expressed a willingness to come back would come on Monday and Tuesday, and half the students would come back on Thursday and Friday in the late morning, early afternoon. So that plan is really mostly designed so that people get accustomed to coming back. We've been out of our typical school mode for 11 months almost at this point. So we're really trying to get people's mindset back into coming back to school. So we heard a lot of feedback from some families that, that wasn't enough, and we agree. That's, that was never really the point to try to say that was going to be the same as a typical school day. So we've been working very hard on trying to figure out logistically how we can increase that. And so what we're going to recommend tonight is that we continue implementing the plan, that we bring students back on February 1st, and we would have the A group on February 1st and the B group on February 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So 1st and 2nd, and the 4th and 5th. But we would immediately begin to ramp up with the goal of all students who wish to return coming back as soon as February 22nd. Full day, 5 days a week, full schedule. Okay? So students that would be online, which we still by law would have to do this year, ISBE has said we have to. So any family that wants to continue to have their children online could do that. Those students would have to follow their regular class schedule, and the teacher would be teaching to the online students at the same time they'd be teaching to the students in their room. So we feel that we can do it safely. We've learned a lot in the last 11 months about the virus, about our ability to cope with that, about how it's transmitted. We've worked through a lot of logistical issues. I will tell you, and Mrs. Ham will actually get up and give some more specifics to this. Our biggest hurdle at this time right now is transportation, okay? So I would tell you 100% we could bring everybody back on February 22nd. However, we don't have enough drivers right now, as it stands today, to start February 22nd. That is because First Student did not have the ability to train drivers for many months because of COVID. All of those training opportunities were put on hold. They've been since released, so they're starting that process again, and they have right now, as of the last time I spoke to Mrs. Ham at 4 o'clock, they have 27 drivers. We have 34 out, okay? So we need to get some more buses still, but what I want to ask the board is for a little bit of indulgence, and once again, we'll go through some details here. For a little bit of indulgence that we want to make a goal the 22nd, but we need to get the transportation worked out, so it may have to get pushed back just because of that issue. But when we're saying push back, days. We're not talking months, weeks. We're talking days. So we're really trying to get this ramped up as quickly as we can to try to get kids back in school because we feel now that the academic detriment is greater than the potential risk when we now know how to handle the spread of this much greater. So I've given it the preamble. I would like Mrs. Springer to come up and talk about the achievement data, which you have in front of you, board members, these two handouts, and talk about the why when we started reviewing student achievement and some of the reasons that we'd really like to ramp up our in-person learning module.
Absolutely. So you'll see in this packet here, the white packet, the winter achievement data.
Oh, yes, she can pull it up there. Steve would have to turn it around there. It'll be on the screen. We're getting there.
I email Allison a lot. There we go.
There it is.
And I'll make it larger.
Thanks.
Okay. So in front of you, you have ReadyMat diagnostic data. I have window 1 ahead of window 2. You'll notice the difference between windows 1 and 2 is the addition of about, I think there's 171 students, but we also add kindergarten in the second administration of the diagnostic. We did not have them test first window because they're entering kindergartners and we did not want to put that burden on them in an e-learning environment. We did the same thing in reading. You'll see, I also put this, there's a 5-level placement if you see that. You see the 5 different colors there. The dark red is as it shows 3 or more grade levels below. And you'll see this difference between the fall and the winter administration. I'll get into more of the specifics down here. This is also the 3 level, what you're used to, kind of a tier 3, a tier 2, and a tier 1. You'll see this very little percentage, 20% here, 20% in the window 1, but you'll see it grew to 35% in window 2. And then this is the breakdown, overall achievement gains and losses by category. I tried to put that there just to make it clear. right, and then I ended up,
Make it
Go ahead.
clear. What am I seeing in this small pyramids on it?
okay, so the one just shows you the breakdown in three, so like the 3 grade levels below. I like the one ahead of here. They give you 3 level placement or 5 level placement, member Lyon. So the member 5, or the 5 level placement actually breaks down the data even further. So the dark red is 3 grade levels below, where the regular red is just 2 grade levels below. The data is available both ways. You're accustomed to seeing the triangles, so that's why I put the triangles in there.
But the triangle.
It is the same data.
Just adds those two together.
It does.
Correct.
It does. Absolutely.
Is this for all students or a certain
This is kindergarten through 8th grade for Ready Math, yes. Yes. And so down here at the bottom of the page, I gave you a table so that you could see between window 1 and window 2 the gains and losses across those 5 bands.
And when did Windows 1 and 2 take place so that people
Window
understand
2
the
actually
thing?
just closed with makeups there on Friday. The fall administration was upon entry to school in September.
So Window 1 was when they got here, Window 2 was recent.
Yep, absolutely. So you'll see those gains and losses. I also broke it down by school. So here are your 3 elementary schools. We operate Ready Math at King, Silas, Steele, Lombard, and Churchill. You'll see a significant growth. I was very pleased to see the significant growth at mid or above grade level, but we also have the addition of kindergarten too, so that plays in there as well. You'll notice that. But I also saw a drop in the 1 grade or 2 grade below, between the fall and winter administrations of the Ready Math, which shows that it's working. It's just, I don't think it's working to the degree that we need it to work, because we need to have students in front of us.
Okay, just to clarify, I'm still looking at the page 2. I guess that's right here.
We're still on Ready Math.
Okay. There's a lot of them that are below grade.
Absolutely.
I'm looking like this is for the window 2 winter. I added the 1, 2, and the 3. We're looking at 65% of our students are below grade.
Where are
That's
you
correct.
at? Yes,
Well,
1 grade
window
level or
2
below or
winter,
more. Yes.
39%, 12%, 14%.
Yep.
That's all below grade.
All below
They're
grade
not
level.
achieving what we want.
They're not performing at grade level. Absolutely.
The good news on that is that it's decreased, or the number of students at grade level has increased by 15% from the start of the year to now. So
From window 1 to window 2.
our staff and students have done a great job of starting to catch up, but we feel like the flywheel needs to turn a little faster, so we need to get people caught up more.
Which is why I put this bar here, just so that it was easier, this table. So you can see there's a decrease in the 1 grade level, 2 grade levels, 3 grade levels below. But you'll see the increase in early on grade level and above, 14% moved into those categories. Those increased by 14%. Okay. So on this one, is everybody okay if I move on?
Just
I don't
one
wanna-
term I can define. I know what grade level means. What's early on mean?
That just means that they are at the 25th percentile or above. On grade level will be a 25th percentile and above. Just like you would when we show Scantron data. It means they're on grade level, but they may be early grade level. So entry to the grade.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So this is K through 8, and this just gives me cumulative. Do we have a breakdown of what, is there a grade level of where we start to lose them versus gain?
I actually see a significant increase in the red starting at 3rd grade. Yes, I broke it down by school, but I didn't break it down by grade level. I didn't know how much information you want, and I can also provide that for you as well. I have that report as well. But yes,
So you're seeing the youngs, the littles, at a certain point we lose, or we start to decline.
yeah, a lot of that is related to, I believe, procedural knowledge versus conceptual knowledge. Sometimes a student can memorize facts pretty easily, but having to apply them to perhaps a story problem or something that really, requires you to apply and not just recall, that becomes a much harder task if we don't have the concept truly solid. Yeah. You'll see, is everybody okay if I keep going? I just want to make sure I don't miss a question. You'll see at the elementaries, we have a significant reduction here of the 1 grade level, 2 grade level below. You'll see a drop at 9% at King, a drop of 12% at Silas, a drop of 14% at Steele. And I really like that drop there in the 2 grade levels below. at each of the schools, but if you look at Steele, we have a drop of 11% in that 2 grade levels below, so those students are moving out of that category, which is great news, great work on everybody's part. I will also tell you that iReady component, where the students are able to work on skills that are directly related to their specific needs, has been very helpful in filling up some of those misconceptions or misunderstandings or gaps in learning. Here's Lombard. I'm not seeing as great of a movement in the 5 through 8, Lombard and Churchill. And this is actually page 4. Okay? If you look at Lombard and Churchill, they are showing some increases, but you know, I mean, if you look at Steele's growth in that top category, they're at 22%. They've improved, right? Above grade level. I'm not seeing that same movement, and that goes to your point, Member Phelps.
Do we have data from a year ago? So we're comparing window 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
How do we compare to a year ago on window 1 and 2?
Okay, so we did not do Ready Math until this year.
And then we had COVID hit too.
Yes. So we really have these two data points to look at.
These numbers aren't exciting to me, but we really don't have a benchmark to know if it's working.
Well, and because Mrs. Springer won't sing her own praises, I'm going to do it for her. It goes a little deeper than that, so that we make sure that we paint a clear picture here. So, back when the district went to Chromebooks, which was 2014, is that right? 2014? Jenny, I'm looking at you. You have a good memory. Oh, yes. You still have a good memory, but now you killed me. Yeah, I think it was 2014. Okay, 2014, there was no stated math curriculum. There was no district adopted resources. So the teachers all had to basically fend for themselves, find the resources, and then somewhat hit a moving target on math. So over the last 3 years, Mrs. Springer has worked with the principals and the teachers to create very concrete paths, curriculum paths for the students. And now we have resources as well. And one of them is this iReady Math, which is an adaptive test which looks at every individual student. So if your child is answering questions really well, the questions get really hard really fast. If your child is missing a lot of questions, it stays at a lower level of questions. So every student's test is different because it's based on how they answer. So we have better data now. So to compare it before was a little bit difficult, and in our staff's complete defense, we didn't really provide them with the tools or the targets necessary to really show where they were supposed to go. So this is really about the first time we could say we have a fundamental understanding of where our students are in math.
And I would say sufficient PD related to conceptual knowledge and really understanding that we have to master the concepts in order to bring that automaticity or that, recall as well. We will go down to this next slide. Here's Ames Web Data. We do this in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. Kindergarten did not take, as I mentioned earlier, they did not take the fall assessment as they were brand new to the building, brand new to school, and we did not want to put that burden on them in the fall with e-learning. You'll notice this winter benchmark, you see a lot of red, right? We definitely have 78% of our students, as you can see right here, in this tier 3 red. So we have a lot of work to do. We need to get the students in front of us to get that done. We need some time to work with them. I've got a synopsis after I show you kindergarten 1st and 2nd about some places to start the work and some things to focus upon. This is just another view of kindergarten. You can see that we have 78% of the students in the red here, which just means that they are high risk and in need of extra support for sure. Here's 1st grade.
Can I ask a question about
Yes,
Ames
sir.
Web though?
Yes.
We went to Ames Web last year. We did it because it was an in-person activity instead of a computer-based activity. I suspect the one we're using here is computer-based
So
because we only saw the children on the
so
computer.
in
Right?
2nd grade, they can use the computer. You still have
No,
to
the
do
kindergarten data we have here.
Right, they have to do those in-person assessments. We had to do those individually.
We brought students in to do those.
So that many students came in.
We did that on Zoom. We did that on Google Meet.
Right. So they were in person. Some were in person, some were in person Zoom.
Oh, so there are some funkiness to this data based
There
on
is
that.
some funkiness, but I don't think enough to compensate for.
No, I'm not saying no.
Right.
It's a big, tall red line there.
Absolutely.
A lot of effort was put in to get us the most fidelity that we could, given
Okay.
the limitations.
So
we had.
what
But it
ended
really
up-
isn't meant for that. The device isn't meant for that type of administration.
Correct. The
Correct.
oral reading fluency will always be given person to person. At second grade, though, they start taking the assessments online.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you. Okay.
Did you have a question? No? Okay. From fall to winter, for first grade, we have a decrease, as you can see, of 11%. You'll notice the red gets shorter here, right? It reduces. And then we added 10% to the green here in first grade, based on our data. The concern here, too, I want you to see, one of the things I'm concerned about with the data is that we've lost students from fall to winter to test. So if you look at fall, right down here about where my cursor is, there's 179 students in the fall that tested. We could only get 135 to test in the winter.
What's that 273 number then?
I mean, in the red, yes. So the number's still reduced.
Right, went from 273 to 250.
250, yes. I was just looking at the red. Thank you for that clarification. This is another picture without the triangle. You'll see that red is reflected here. That red is reflected here. We have 54% of our students who are at high risk. And then second grade, here is second grade.
Much better.
Those are the students we've had the most opportunity to be face-to-face with, right? If you think about their educational career, they are the students we've had the most access to. They dropped 5% in the red and then added 6% to the green this term. So here's a little bit of the analysis between all of these charts. I tried to give you some high points. 78% of our kindergarten students demonstrate high risk or need. Greatest areas of need are the initial sound isolation, and then it'll talk about some of these other assessments we use. But basically, we're looking for growth in knowledge and proficiency. I talked about that automaticity. Many students do not yet have enough knowledge of letters and or sounds to demonstrate the necessary automaticity. So we're going to be working on that. First grade, reduced.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
On the one here that has second grade,
Yes.
is that correct that the number of students taking it was only 87 and then went down to 78?
Yes, we lose students every time, and that was one of my concerns
No,
overall with all the assessments.
But we only started with 87 out of a cohort of 300, right?
And we had 273
Kindergarten.
first grade. So,
You do it one-on-one with the teacher. She said second grade, you do it by yourself.
that's why we gotta get back in the classroom.
Okay, I'm gonna look at the Scantron reading data. I don't wanna read all of this stuff I already talked to you about, but Scantron reading would be third grade through 12th grade. So you have third graders through 12th graders. We have gains and losses. You'll see that there was no movement in the below average. Now, when you look at these, Board of Ed, the light pink, light green, and dark green are 25th percentile and above. So if they are at the light pink mark, they're on grade level, but they're early grade level, if that makes sense. They're 25th percentile to 50th percentile here. Then we go from 50 to 75, 75 to 100. Okay? So our growth is very minimal here overall as a school district. This is just comparing the whole district. But you'll notice, look at the number of total count in the fall of students who took the test, 2,082 to 1,810. So we're losing students in that active participation there. So here I broke it down by elementary schools. So you can see window 1 to window 2. You'll see, I'm kind of concerned, I'm not really sure what to attribute it to, but Silas, if you see here, added 12% to the below average in this grouping. You had some gains, but for the most part, it's pretty stagnant or going backwards. Here's grades 5 through 8. I try to compare the same way so it's easy to follow. You'll see at Churchill, 448 students took the assessment in the fall, where 326 took it in the winter. We provided the same resources, provided as much direction and support I mean, I know the principals and teachers called home and tried to talk to folks as well. And then from Lombard, 462 to 432, they didn't lose as many students, but they still saw a loss. But the data, you'll see this mean score did not increase greatly. And typically in Scantron, you want to look at a year's worth of growth, as you would want to do with any diagnostic. But they should be at least at the halfway mark for their spring growth score, and we are not there. Alright. This is Galesburg High School and Galesburg High School North compared in the same fashion. We lost 100 students from Galesburg High School from fall to winter administration. We also had Galesburg High School North lost 5, but I think some of that might be attributed to graduation. Mindy? I think they did have some midterm grads, or semester grads, so that might be a possibility there. But you'll see they dropped 7. So these numbers down at the bottom for Galesburg High School North's comparison is a little bit off, because it's such a small pool of people to draw from. And then we have Scantron Math, which GHS and GHS North have here, because they all K through 8 use the Ready Math, so you would have your high school students. We had 468 students take the test in the fall, 377 take the test in the winter. You'll also see that large reduction between fall and winter for GHS North. But you'll see an increase of 6% in the below average, the dark red, which is not on grade level.
Well, and one of the things that's difficult at the high school too is with the block schedule, not everybody's taking math at the same time, so you even have a bigger shrinkage of number of people, so it's somewhat random in terms of who takes it. So it's another difficult measurement tool with the 4 blocks.
Can I ask you to pull up this other two-sided document as well? This is the 6th through 12th grade data that I wanted to present to you. You'll see that term 1 is on the left-hand side, term 2, F's by student. So that top area where it says 101 F's by student for 6th grade for term 1, that's number of students. Below it is the actual total number of F's. 278 F's first term, 398 second term. Currently, 39.8% of students at Lombard have an F.
And it's 1 F out of how many classes are they taking?
7.
But it also, so one student can count for 7 of those then?
So there are 116 students represented. There are 398 F's. So one student could have multiple F's.
Okay.
Theoretically, yes, somebody could be 7 of those.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So in comparison, term 1 to term 2, we added 15 students with F's, and we increased the F's by 120 from term 1 to term 2. Churchill Junior High, you have 7th grade. There are 106 F's in term 1, 120 in term 2, which means 41% of students have an F currently. And there are 399 F's in total for this term, which is a increase of 71 F's.
So I'm going to ask,
How do you get 41%?
Because there are 292 enrolled 6th graders, or 7th
I
graders.
thought we just clarified that one student can have multiple.
So there are 120 students represented. So of the population of the 292 enrolled, 41% have an F.
Right.
Okay, that data's not out.
No, she just gave it to you.
Okay.
She's just saying 120 of the number of enrolled. So
Member Cervantes.
so one of the questions that I have, and again, my questions aren't always popular. Of the F's that we are tracking, how many of them are because we know that the students don't know versus the students aren't turning homework in?
That one we would have to dig deeper into that. I think your principals would have that data.
Right. I mean, because those are, to me, those are two different issues.
Compliance versus understanding.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, yes, these numbers are startling, but I kind of want to ground ourselves in, 11 months of online learning,
Right.
online fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to engage, these students or whatever, whether that's in person or something else, is the aptitude there versus I'm just not, I had a student in the district and there were definitely times where my son was like, I don't want to do the homework. It's stupid. I know what the concept is. I did that problem 16 times. Well, why do I got to do it another 100? Versus, I'm not going to do the 16 problems or the 100 because I don't understand it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's something we're digging into at the building levels and the grade levels and at the classroom level.
Okay.
If you look at 8th grade, we have 108 students and they are also, surprisingly, I double checked to make sure that this was accurate, but they also have 292 students in 8th grade, and that's 37% of students with an F. All right, Galesburg High School. I want to make sure that we have some of these terms. On track means they're on track to graduate. Monitor means they are within 2 credits of being off track. So if they're monitored, they are on track, but they're within 2 credits of being off track. Does that make sense? Okay. And then off track is they are off track. They are not ready to be, they're not in line for graduation.
How far is off? So when you say off track,
It could be anything from a handful of credits to just significantly below. I mean, Mr. Houston, do you want to define that any other way? It's just they're not on track. Yeah. So the number.
So off track of the total populace, we got 26% of the students are not on track to graduate.
And you have 25.8% who are within 2 credits of being off track.
Exactly.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
half of our population at the high school are not on track,
Well,
are very close.
are off track or within 2 credits of being off track.
Yes.
That's fair to say. If you'll look at that bottom chart, term 1 to term 2, that just shows you the distribution of grades across the terms. You'll see an increase of 106 Fs in term 2, which brings that total in term 2 to 884 Fs. We are also up 89 Ds in that same time.
As far as being on track to graduate, how do these numbers compare to last year's numbers?
We had that on a spreadsheet. Mr. Powell, did you have last year's data?
I don't have last year's because I just made this spreadsheet to track some of this stuff better for this year. So it's hard for me to go back with the loss of students and things like that. So kind of starting fresh with this year with these numbers that I have on track and things like that.
We don't know how many students last year failed to graduate.
Off the top of my head, no, I have to do some digging on that.
We do have that information.
Okay, we just don't have it
I don't have it right here.
accessible.
But we do have that.
If you'll flip the page over, you'll see out of these 884 Fs, we break it down by lunch code. The discrepancy in the total, if you look on the right-hand side for term 2, Fs, 696, 34, 103, is everybody there with me? Backside
Top left corner of the back side.
says
page.
by lunch code, it's the last column in that chart right there. So in digging this information, Skyward doesn't necessarily indicate a code. So there are some students without a lunch code associated with them, which is the difference between the total number of Fs and what's on this chart. So if a student isn't represented, it's still accurate that the total is 884 Fs, but it's broken down into free and direct cert, reduced, and then non-free or reduced
Under the T1, what's the student period?
students. Mm-hmm. We also broke it down by race code, if you'll look to the next column or the next chart. And then I have GHS North data. You'll see there. They significantly reduced their Fs and actually reduced Ds by 4. Fs reduced by 12. And this is not reflective of all students because some are partially enrolled in GHS, so those will be reflected in the GHS data, if that makes sense. So if they spend any kind of portion of time enrolled in a GHS class, they would not be represented in this data.
And I apologize for 1 second. Mr. Young, can you report out what you just let me know about the non-engagement versus engagement?
President Cervantes' question about engagement versus academics, after the first term, we haven't calculated second term yet, before it ended. It was roughly 8 to 1 in terms of failures of students receiving failing grades because they were just simply not engaged versus, the one that is. So, our biggest hurdle, I think for a lot of principals here is had that ability, I have no doubt that our teaching staff would do great things with these numbers would be that.
Well, and I would say with, I can see at least one outreach worker in the room. I mean, our outreach workers and deans and principals, I mean, they've done yeoman's work. They have done a fantastic job of getting out there and trying to get to families, you know, making calls all hours of the day, nights, weekend. I mean, they've been really, really engaged. So our folks have really been trying to get out there as much as possible. I have been very proud of our outreach workers. We made a recommitment to outreach this year to really give them the opportunities to do their jobs. And they and the deans, because the deans haven't had students in session, have basically been acting as outreach workers as well. I mean, they have been doing a tremendous job of getting out there. So, you know, I feel like in the setting we're in, we've kind of, I don't want to say exhausted, but I'm getting to the closest thing exhausted what we can do with them in remote to try to get them engaged from our standpoint. So, you know, this is why we're
I don't
coming to you
disagree.
today saying we need to accelerate our in-person plan.
Well, and I get to give you like the doomsday look, right? I mean, between fall and winter. But I would concur with Dr. Asplin. I mean, we have people working around the clock, teachers, outreach workers, principals, secretaries, all trying to engage students, and some with just no success. Member Cervantes.
And so through those conversations, I'm curious, what are we hearing about the lack of engagement? Is it access? Is it support at home? What?
I'll be honest with you, and Alicia might be able to, we've called home to the point, emailed home, visited to the point where a lot of families are exhausted too, and they're like, I'm shutting you off, I'm not taking your email, I'm not taking your phone calls. I mean, to a certain degree, they're exhausted too, because they're trying to get their kids engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So some of those kids aren't even trying, I mean, they're having problems at home with their parents trying to keep them engaged. So, I think it's just a point where we've done everything we can, and have we reached everybody? But boy, I don't know, I really think the deans and the outreach workers and the principals have done everything we can to reach out to these families. A lot of them are already like, whoa, too much is too much, I can't get my kid involved. But, you know, you keep trying, but I don't know what to do, I don't know how to fix it. I don't want to speak, is that Nick, Alicia, if you're into that?
Well, if you want to hire 90, you know, in my school, we have roughly 90 tier 3s, I would consider kids that are, you know, chronic, non-engaging kids. If you want to hire 90 people to go sit with them at their home one-on-one and stay on them or on top of them, that's the answer. That's the battle we fight every day. We're in just a constant cycle going to homes and saying, please, just get on a meet. Just start there. And stay with us 30 minutes, please, when you get your kids caught up. It's not the parents' fault. I mean, they have jobs and lives too. It's just a fine line that you're trying to toe between home and school, and some households that doesn't work.
No, and you'll see that as you see that reflected in the data from fall to winter. The number of students dropping off to do something that's significant as part of their academic year, you know, and just demonstrating that proficiency. Dr. Asplin, did you want me to go into the...
Before you go there, Mrs. Springer,
Yes.
I wanted just if you can circle back to us. So the data that breaks the numbers down by Fs by socio, which is equivalent to socioeconomic class and racial demographics.
Yes.
Can you circle back to us with then the total number that represents of the the percentage of students by that demographic?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
The free and reduced lunch is exponential. I don't have the actual percentage for you. I could get that. I have that on another chart, but yeah.
Free and reduced combined account for approximately 65% of students that go for high school. We combine those two. The reduced lunch population is a much smaller population. We are more heavily weighted with the free lunch students.
Mm-hmm. Direct cert.
The race breakdown is going to be pretty approximate.
Mm-hmm.
We've got about 65% white, about 12% Black African American, about 10% Hispanic Latino, and then I believe it's in the 10 to 12% two or more races.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that adds up like perfectly 100, but it's pretty close to those numbers.
Okay. I mean, and because I know that we're live, I'm gonna say something pretty explicit here because we've received feedback. We ask these questions because these questions are important. It's not to imply that one section of students, one population of students, deserves more attention than another, or that one population of students is better off than another. But the reality of our current system, not just here in Galesburg, but in the state of Illinois and nationally, is that COVID, educational resources, lack thereof, socioeconomic classes, impact racial demographics differently. Period. That is a non-negotiable statement. And there's a lot of educators in this room that can help gather that data, point individuals to research that can support that statement. It is our job to make sure that we're asking these questions, because it is our job to make sure that we're doing our best by all students, which sometimes means digging into what those individual numbers mean. Okay, thank you.
So are there any questions regarding achievement data before? So this is a lot of the why, all right? We wanted to get into the why because we need people to understand, you know, we've had an opinion and a position for a while, and we've talked about methodically trying to get students in it. And we have seen, and you'll see in these, as we've shown in these reports, when our students are with the teachers, our achievement does go up, and kind of a lot. So, I mean, our teachers are doing the work. Like, it's happening for our kids. It's the problem is getting the kids to the teacher. And so we feel like we've shown that our folks are doing a fine job of meeting the needs of the kids when they're with them. It's just that, and we know the reasons why they haven't been. And, you know, it's been a challenge, obviously, and we're trying to keep people safe, and we're trying to do right by everybody. The recommendation that we come to tonight is with the full knowledge that that's not completely popular with some. We understand that, but we feel like the old statement of, I reserve the right to change my mind when I have new information. And so when we finally did these grade reports and these achievement reports, it spoke to us that the answer seemed pretty clear, that we needed to get students back in the building. We needed to get more students back and as much as they can. So we feel that we can do a good job of keeping them safe. If there aren't questions, and I'm going to stop for a second, if there aren't questions about the why, I do then want Mrs. Springer to talk about some of the identified barriers to getting kids back in the classroom and what we're doing to overcome those. And then I'll have Courtney Knuth will get up and talk about some of the health-related issues. And then Matt Davis is going to talk about food service, and then Jen Ham will get up and talk about transportation, some other logistical issues. So are there any questions before I also then bring up the teachers that were here to present on what the in-person looked like for them back in the fall, because they're out in the hall waiting to do that as well. Any questions on the why? Okay, maybe we ought to let those ladies go first. So yeah, you want to go out there and get them? Val's gonna get them.
Hello, I am Angie Harshbarger, and I teach first grade at King School. And I am Libby Height, and I am an ESL teacher at Steele School, and I work with kindergarten, first, and second graders.
And I am Valerie Erickson, and I am a kindergarten teacher at Silas Willard. So to go ahead and start this off, we just want to make the statement that any of the statements that we say, these are from our personal opinions and experiences and may not necessarily represent the entire K-2 staff or all grade levels.
Okay, we wanted to start with our impressions of in-person learning, overall impressions. And the first thing we wanted to say was that the students were thrilled to be in person and to see their schools, sometimes for the first time. So I'm at Steele, and Nielsen closed, Gale closed, so we have a lot of new friends. And I work with kindergartners, and so it's their first time coming to school, and so they were super excited to be there. Something else we noticed is that most students were very compliant with mask wearing. We think due to the excitement, they were perfectly willing to wear their masks. Even our smallest students were pretty good about spacing and social distancing. And we talked about this as a group that even if we start in February, it's kind of like August, where you're going to be teaching all the expectations, and social distancing and masks will just be a new part of school expectations. All right. Specific things that went well during our in-person learning. We were able to watch kids apply skills and truly know their understanding. One of the barriers with online learning is that you don't know if a parent helped a student and that's why they got it perfect, or if they truly have mastered the skill, whereas in person we know their understanding. There's also more authentic opportunities for informal assessment. So when you are teaching with Seesaw, you receive a finished product, and so you're not able to see the process. And so when you're in person, you can constantly assess how they're doing, how are they arriving at their answers. We also could teach, or at least me, I could teach the basic skills of using the Seesaw platform. I had my students bring their Chromebooks and spent part of my time with them. Some of my students had never completed a Seesaw activity before they came to see me at the end of October. Some of them haven't completed one since they left me at the end of November. So it was a good time to show them the platform. The technology barrier was removed for students who were struggling with technology. In person, we're not, requiring them to be a master of their Chromebooks. Teachers also had use of all their tools in their toolbox. We have our props, we have our gestures, our manipulatives, our games, endless amounts of school supplies, so we kind of have everything at our disposal, which was refreshing. We also had the ability to scaffold as needed based off of immediate observations. Kind of goes back to the authentic opportunities for informal assessment. So when I'm working with a child, I would never give them an assignment, walk away, and come back and say like, oh, how'd you do? It's a process. I'm constantly moving them through the material, switching up my approach, offering new manipulatives, etc., so you can scaffold as they're doing an activity. And lastly, we could meet the needs of all learners. Tactile learners, we feel, are disadvantaged with just the Seesaw approach. So that is all for our things that went well. And next is Nancy.
So some limitations that we found with the in-person learning as we had it in October, November, were we weren't able to service very many students because we were tasked with only having 4 kids come, 2 at a time. So we never got to that next round. So that made it difficult to serve very many students. The time that they were at school was very short. They were only there an hour. When the buses were late, that meant got down to 50 minutes, and so we weren't able to get a lot accomplished. That also made it hard to do lots of different activities because we didn't have enough time to keep switching. That 2 to 3 time was hard for some of the families that we asked to come in. It just wasn't doable for them, with daycare or work schedules, or I don't really want to get my kid up to school for just an hour, those kind of things. Also, it mainly affected our EL and kindergarten students, but some of the friends that we wanted to participate didn't have physicals or birth certificates or immunizations, so they were out because of that, and it only lasted a short time, so they never made it in. So some recommendations we had going forward are just the continued support and material for our classrooms, gloves, sanitizer, all those things. Try to have a fun school vibe with still being safe. We realize we can't do all the things that we love about school and teaching as far as games and partner games and all those things, but trying to keep ourselves at ease and be safe, but yet this is school and this is fun and learning is fun. So we felt like the hybrid model was a good jumping off point. It allowed it to be available to all students, as well as keeping it a safe number to get started. The 3-hour time slot we felt is much better than the 1-hour time slot. Just we can have more targeted instruction for literacy, math, and social emotional skills and things like that. But we also thought going forward, is there an opportunity to have a group in the morning? As K2 people, we know that students usually do their best learning in the morning. So, just going forward, perhaps an option for parents, and it might be some parents are choosing not to come because it's an afternoon and if they take care or work or whatever. So just having that option for parents.
All right, and I get the privilege of talking about the struggles with remote learning. So as K2 students, we know that they cannot tell time at the beginning of the school year, and right now with Google Meets, they have whole class Google Meets, small group Google Meets, special meets, additional service meets, and it's just asking a lot for our K2 students to keep track of those schedules. A lot of families, or a lot of students do have great families at home to help support them and get them onto those meets, but then we have the other side where students are at a daycare, or maybe there's multiple kids in the house, whatever it may be. Sometimes they are trying to figure this out on their own, and that's a lot to ask. Another thing is there are language barriers created with this for our EL families. We know that everyday vocabulary for EL families can be a lot and very taxing, and then we are asking them to understand the technology side of the vocabulary as well. Another thing is technology can be very confusing for families. As teachers, we had training, we had the summer to prepare and look at the platforms and figure out the different resources that we can use and how to work those resources. The families were offered the parent university, but that was obviously dependent on their schedules and what was happening at home. So obviously the technology side of things can be challenging for families and a little bit overwhelming at times. As teachers, we know it can be overwhelming for us. So we can't even imagine what it's like for families who have multiple kids at home. It is hard to know what students know and are able to do without parent support. So we see two sides here with Seesaw activities. One side, we have kids that are trying to do these activities completely on their own with no support or very little support, just depending on what's going on at home. And then the other side of things is you have parents who are doing too much work for their kids. And sometimes as teachers, we're not able to completely know and understand what our students are actually able to do. When it came time for assessment, some of us were a little floored, and others of us had our eyes open to what our kids actually could do independently. Students don't have or have run out of supplies to participate in learning opportunities. The district has been great about allowing us to send home materials and have sent materials home, but as you guys know, kids are kids and materials get lost. And not only that, but sometimes they run out of the materials. And like for kindergarten, for example, the manipulatives that are used in first quarter may not be applicable to third quarter manipulatives just because of how fast they are growing and learning. Relationships can be very hard to build via a computer screen. Teachers are doing their very best to build those relationships with kids. It just simply is not the same via a computer screen. And then we have zero control of the home environment or their learning environment. At school, we can provide a safe and positive learning environment with multiple resources around the house. Whereas kids at home, there's lots of distractions, there's family arguments, there's toys, there's all sorts of different things. At daycare, you've got kids and multiple meets all over the place, so it's just hard to control that environment and make it a positive place for them to learn. And then the last point here is some students do not engage in live Google Meets or Seesaw lessons. As much as staff has gone out and worked their hardest to get these kids on live meets and do their Seesaw activities, we simply cannot force those kids to get on and do those activities. And therefore, for some of these kids, we are seeing very little to no learning or learning with huge gaps just because of what they have or have not participated in. So with that, we want to thank you for listening to our presentation, and we would like to open it up to any questions.
Any questions from board members?
I have one question. How are the kids of color, I'm talking about Latinx and African American kids, doing in these environments?
I mean, I have mixed. I mean, I don't think it's showing mixed at all. I mean, I would say that my lower covered students are having a harder time accepting those things, you know, having to do all these times and having the codes and having that parent support of getting on. The parents are trying when I call them, you know, or whatever, they'll try to get on. Lots of parents are working, and so, you know, they're not at home during the day, or they're with a sitter or an older sibling, and they're trying to do work also. So I don't think it's necessarily.
Yeah, I don't know that it necessarily goes off of demographics, but more of parents and their work schedule and how many other kids are at home and where those kids are at during the school day.
I have some parents who work second shift, and so normally I think they take their kids to school, come home, sleep, because that's their nighttime and that's our daytime. And so I have some students who they're present with me, but you know, parents are sleeping in the background, and that's fine, that's their nighttime, but there's not someone there to sit and say, okay, now let's do this activity together, or let's look at your schedule today, where do you need to be and at what time. Any change we give is just like drastic, oh my goodness. Trying to then explain to the family that you can do times and links, etc. I'd say as consistent as we can be, and the less change we make to the schedules, the better. Just for the student's sake and honestly the family's sanity. So.
What about attendance?
I would say on, well, attendance-wise, not too bad, but engagement-wise is a different story. I have between 4 and 6 kids that engage very little during the day.
What do you mean by that?
They either do not come live or they do not do any learning activities.
Do you allow them to turn their cameras on or off?
Yes, I do.
I have my students keep them on unless I can see something else going on in the background.
Usually I say, I look to see your face, and then usually they turn it on, because I do want to see their face. And some of my kids I've taught how to screen share, so I can walk them through an activity. They hate that they can't then see me. So they want to see us just as much as we want to see them. So I have one little boyfriend, and he constantly pops back over to the Google Meet tab, you know, and then he pops back to Seesaw, and I can walk him through that, what to click and where to go, because otherwise he's very confusing on his own. But he does constantly look back to see in our ways. But I do think there is something about seeing each other. I want to see them, and I want them to see me.
I usually have a question, like in my morning meeting, I usually have a question, and so usually they'll turn their camera on when it's their turn to answer the question and do our agreement. So usually, even if it's during the learning time, they have their camera off or whatever, they usually will come. And if I ask them, then usually I'll just go, you know, answer a question.
My final question is, what is your biggest problem with online learning?
I think I try not to take it personally that I don't feel like they're making as much growth as in obviously it's not a normal year. But I take a lot of pride in my students and teaching them what they need to know. And so this year it's hard that when we did our assessment, I met with our interventionist and said, I see these scores. I'm just not sure what to do about it now because I'm doing and offering, but a lot of them are coming, and so it's like I don't know what to do. So
Yeah, I would say to go along with that, for me, I feel like in a normal school year, I know what my kids need, and I know my kids really well. I know where my kids are at and what I need to do to push them to get to the next level. And online, I am really struggling because a lot of times I am looking at activities and I don't know how they got completed. I don't know if a parent could have easily completed some of the activities, and I don't know that. So for me, it's really hard to judge where my kids are at, where I can meet them, and how I can push them to the next level, and providing the resources to do so, and helping them engage enough to can push them forward.
And I feel like relationship building is a key as well as this year. So last year I was at Milton, so I'm at new schools, new students, new colleagues, and so you're trying to build relationships across the board, and it's just harder to do on a computer. So I feel like once you've built a relationship with a student, they're so much more excited to see you, they're more engaged about learning. So building those relationships can be slower, and I worry about my kids, the language barrier and technology barrier. Was huge at the beginning. It's not better, but I still feel like there's a disadvantage from afar, whereas in person you have so much more control over scaffolding environments.
So are you suggesting that you want the students back in class ASAP?
We like this approach. We like the 3-hour, like, dive in. You know, it's like one thing to put the toe in. It's like that was the 1 hour. Now we're putting our feet in. I like the incremental bit. Like I said, I think tons of wild change quickly is hard on our families. But I think this is going to be a good platform going forward, getting them to a larger checking time.
I do want my kids to come in person. I do like that parents have a choice, because I do know that there are parents that are comfortable sending their kid, and so, giving that choice to the parents is with me. But I want to have my kids in my room and be able to help them and scaffold and see what they know. And my own children have been in school, hybrid models for the whole student, and it's working pretty well. We've been quarantined because of it. I mean, anything like that. So, yeah, I'm ready.
I'm ready as well, just simply because looking at the data of first semester, it's astounding how far behind we are at this point. And so as a teacher, that breaks my heart, because I want my kids to be able to succeed in their education. So for the simple fact that I want my kids to be where they need to be, yes, I want that.
Question. Is it okay when Member Hunnigan? I think that Member Phelps and Member Sherpy may have had questions, or at least I saw their hands move to their mics. Maybe their questions have been answered.
Well, I think they kind of answered most of the questions I had. I want to thank you for coming and present to us. It was very informative.
Any other members have additional questions?
So as we ramp up and bring more kids, do you feel your ability to teach in person and reach the remotes, do you feel that you're equipped and be able to handle that also?
Well, I think if you would have asked me in August if I was ready to be a full-time remote teacher, I probably would have said no. But, we've changed and we've learned, and some of the things that I didn't know how to do last year, the time that I do know how to do now. So I don't know how it's going to go teaching in person and remote, because we haven't done it. I will do my best, to reach everybody the best I can. So, but until we do it, I'm not sure how it's going to go.
I think it's going to be an adjustment, for sure. Obviously, we're stepping into ground that we've never gone in before, so it's going to be a challenge, but I think all of us teachers are up for that challenge, because we know that hopefully it's going to be better this year.
I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit, and I apologize. But first I want to thank you for coming in. We did ask to speak with some educators, so thank you. I appreciate you coming in to speak with us. One of the things that Dr. Esplin had presented is a potential plan to go back to full 5-day in person. So that's what I'm going to ask you about. And I understand that you're speaking on your own behalf only and not on behalf of anyone else. Okay. My question is, it's obvious that students are falling behind and performing poorly, but it's also evident that some students are doing very well in the online learning. So my question is, if we return to full 5-day in-person, will that negatively impact those kids that are doing well? Because it will obviously take away from your availability to support those kids. And then also, how will that impact your workload as an educator to support those two modalities?
We've had heard the plan, so I'm not really exactly sure how it would work. Out of my 20 students, I have 4 staying home, so I'm not sure how to teach all day at school, which, I mean, I know they can need to be in school to learn, but I don't know how to teach the ones at home also, and give them a fair education as well when we are giving them the choice to stay home, so they have same opportunity to learn like they did at school. So I really don't know what you said. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure they have a plan of how that could roll out and work.
Well, and it's going
Again,
to depend,
I do apologize.
it's going to depend on how many people, because we're going to give parents another opportunity to opt, for which way they want to go. So.
Thank you.
Again, I have one more question. What about you taking care of yourselves? How fearful are you of going back into that classroom, given the fact that it could be 5 days a week?
I guess for me, I'm fairly healthy, so I can't, I guess I don't want to speak for someone who does have health concerns, because those are that is something to consider. But for me, I guess I'm going to be trusting that the district is going to keep us as safe as we possibly can. They're going to put safety measures in place. They're going to provide the hand sanitizer, the washing, all of that thing. So I know that they don't want anything to happen to us just as much as we don't want it to happen to them either. So I guess in that aspect, I would trust that this new plan would have some safety measures in place as well. I guess.
But until then, I would say 2 masks, lots of sanitizer. I think the time I'd be most nervous about if they were all day is lunchtime. You know, these masks stop people eating, breathing, laughing, talking. The louder you talk, the more you spread. And so that would be, I have no idea what a plan looks like for that, but that would be the time of day. Think about the adults who are supervising that activity lunchtime. That would be a friendly time for me.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Again, I will echo the thanks. Thank you for coming and talking and presenting and sharing your perspective as teachers.
Mrs. Springer, would you like to come back up and give some of the high notes to some of the issues that were raised there and talk about what our efforts are to break down those barriers?
Absolutely. I'd also like to touch on a little bit of the hybrid afternoon, what that looks like. Can I go there first?
Sure.
I have a couple principals, Mr. Hawkins, Mr. Houston, were going to be able to come up and join me. Their comments were appreciated, honestly. Those are some of the same concerns we've had as well in regard to lunchroom and spacing and things like that. You'll notice that in both Mr. Davis's considerations for a return to learn and mine as well, with additional plexiglass, using larger spaces to spread out, utilizing a cafeteria and a gym space to spread students out, separate them with plexi. But Mr. Hawkins and Mr. Houston, if you want to come up here and kind of chit-chat about what the afternoon looks like, because my concern is we have a lot of folks who think it's going to be a study hall, and that's absolutely not what it is, and I don't know quite how that was communicated to folks, because all along we've put in place that it's going to be intervention and an opportunity to do some guided practice and things like that. So here are some activities that will take place in the afternoon.
When you're saying afternoon, you're talking about the plan that is currently scheduled to start February 1st.
That's right.
Okay.
Misconceptions, I believe, that need to be cleared up.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say that today was a great day. You know, we've been in the building since we closed down. And sometimes it was just one of us, and then another person would come back, then the hourly employees came back. And I've always had my steady group of people in the back hallway that have been awesome, coming every day. But today to walk through the building and see lights on in every classroom was huge. It was a great day for me. But the building's still dead because the life of the building's not there. So let's talk about some of the things that we can do in PE. Let's face it, I talked to a parent today who is concerned about the well-being, the physical well-being of their child. Their child, even at the elementary level, is putting on weight. All right. PE is going to give our students the opportunity to come in, do exercise circuits, walking circuits, small group activities, health labs, small group work. Even though we have a reduced capacity in the classroom, all those things can happen. We have all our classes that are extremely hands-on, art, industrial arts. They're finally going to be able to pick up something and work with a tool or have something in their hand. Look at math. ELA, you saw plenty of data up there that tells you that we are definitely behind. And it's just not the kids who are struggling. It's, we're not getting enough kids up into the green. All right, so it's the kids that, typically do very well in math who are also, and this is give us an opportunity. If you look at, I'm just going to say it, we have our elementary teachers in Ready Math that are really working and going like crazy, and we are really not getting our wheels going at the middle level like we should. All right, and I think that one of the reasons is we're still trying to adapt and trying to figure out how to teach everything, and we're getting bogged down in it. And getting kids back in the classroom, I definitely think, getting kids in front of you is a big deal as far as teaching goes. Science, there's labs that need to be done. Looking at that. Social studies, the opportunity, this was a perfect year to have virtual town hall meetings, but to also have, happen to come off mute to get your point across in a discussion is a lot different than being live and in person. All right, being able to have a civil discussion with your peers in the classroom. The ability to continue, we're not going to be able to have physical field trip opportunities because of the situation, but we already have teachers who are looking into virtual field trip opportunities that they can also do remotely with the kids at home, but also show in the classroom. This is the first year we've truly had an advocacy
a full period advocacy at Churchill. And I think the strongest part of our advocacy is that's where we're going to try to get our SEL program. And there's a lot of work that's been done in the SEL program and a lot of good work. But at the same time, getting more students exposed to those SEL committees, activities is going to be huge. It's also a place where we've started a school-wide classroom approach to classroom management and behavior, CHAMPS. And we're going to be able to use advocacy as a way to allow students to understand what that looks like on a daily basis. Our lunch, because our students will be eating lunch at home, when a student at our school typically would have lunch scheduled, they're going to have a streaks period, which is going to be simply an extra intervention period to help those kids that are struggling. All right. The thing I'm going to end on before I hand it over to Mr. Houston, we speak of one Galesburg all the time. This virtual remote environment and the data that we've seen up here today, there's not one Galesburg. All right. And if we want to get truly to where we start closing that divide, we got to get our kids in school. We do. And Dr. Aspen will tell you that he's had to kind of beat me down a little bit because I've been one of those naysayers from the beginning that wants kids in school, wants kids in school, wants kids in school. I have a senior. Maybe I was being selfish. He's doing extremely well in the virtual environment. He asked me, he said, if I'm doing so well, why do I got to come back? And I said, because you go to school. And you don't go to, if I wanted to sign you up for virtual school, I would have sent you up to the Chicago Virtual High School. But you go to school in Galesburg, and you need to be in a classroom. Because you need to see kids, you need to see people. All right? So that's all I got to say. Sorry if I started rambling.
Well, I'm just going to echo a lot of things he said, but in all honesty, I want to touch on the point that the vibe in the school today of teachers just getting to see each other, I can't imagine what it's going to do to the kids. I really mean that. There was a vibe in the school today. He talked about it. The fact that teachers got to come in, it felt so normal for me. It felt so normal for them. I can't imagine what it's going to do to kids. Our kids need us more than ever. We can agree that the gaps in learning that have been developed over this thing are astronomical. You've seen some of it. Having time in the afternoons to do some guided practice with kids, seeing where they're at in their learning, checking for understanding, and bringing them back up is what we really need. So we're going to get that in the morning. We're going to get that information, but in the afternoon, we're going to get that one-on-one. And I can't tell you what the one-on-one is going to do, maybe academically, but I know what's going to do with the social and emotional needs of our kids. Having that one-on-one time with a teacher. He's got a senior. Those guys, can you imagine missing your senior year? I mean, can you imagine a freshman not even knowing where to go when they come to us next week? I mean, these are all things that just climate and culturally we're just suffering in. We can do more things on this schedule in the afternoon with some of our SEL stuff, but some of the work that we've done with some of the failures, the back on track stuff, as we've talked about, having Wednesdays to be able to do back on track meetings with our counselors and our students is going to be a benefit. Having a committed time for special ed to have IEP meetings is going to be a benefit. Our counselors are constantly trying to find time to have 504 plans. So to find an ideal schedule that's going to work during a non-ideal time, it's not. I think we can all agree to that. We're still in a pandemic. We're just doing the best we can. But I'm going to tell you, our kids need us. And that's evident by some of the data that was shared with you tonight. Our kids are coming in the afternoon. It's not only the academic. He talked about science labs, getting hands-on learning. I'm going to tell you that the kids who have struggled probably are kids who have struggled in the past as well. But we've identified some kids who are struggling who have never struggled. And you know why? Because they haven't had band. They haven't got to put a paintbrush in their hand. It could be a vocational kid never getting to break down a brake system. You know, getting kids back in the afternoon for those hands-on opportunities to learn is going to be huge. It's just going to be huge. And so, you know, we're inching back to normalcy, and I applaud the district for what they've done. I'm even more excited about the work in the professional development that Tiffany and the district has done, because we might reshape the landscape of education when we come back. If we will bring the tools that we've learned back into our building, we might have a chance to really make ground up on our kids. So that's about what I've got.
I think that initial question that was brought about by the teachers, how I think from Member Walters also, how will you teach both the students in front of you and the students at home? I actually had one of the instructional coaches put out a video today that showed the teachers how to actually use either their webcam that we purchased them, the DocCam, or their Chromebook, how to record themselves. They could do the Google Meet, or they could record themselves. So even if a student couldn't be there in the afternoon, or if they're just at home, they have access to that, both live, and then it would be attached to their learning platform as well for reference. So even if a kid could not attend the live synchronous meet, they would still have access to that information. So hopefully that helps with that question. You'll notice, I think you all have my space, logistics, movement, and manpower. Those are some of the things I'm considering as we look at this. Plexiglass dividers, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, would be needed. You all have that, I think, from Dr. Asplin, perhaps. Okay, very good. Proactive physical education spacing, evaluating the course numbers and placements of students. If there's multiple classes during the same period, we would have to identify the space in which to use. Really want to encourage people to get outside and to use that time and that space for some fresh air. Reassigning space for PE classes and teachers that take place during, like in the gym class, during those lunch lines at the elementary school, specifically Silas, I think about, that has to share both the cafeteria and the gym. You'll need to utilize that gym during some of that time, so having a different place for PE to take place is a consideration. Lunchroom spacing, I've even talked with Mr. Bradburn about this, about utilizing both the cafeteria and the gym, but also maybe that front hallway. Churchill might be using that front hallway as well and into the auditorium. We can be creative. We can find solutions. We have time to do so. Logistics, consider grouping of students for the activities instructions. Those are just things that teachers and principals are going to have to work on, like the how and the what that takes place with groupings of students. The use of classroom materials, we're already being creative about that. Students have their own individual bags in some cases, if they're utilizing materials that are just specific to them, rather than your known, shared crayon bucket there. And then creating expectations within the classroom for the purpose of maintaining appropriate cleaning procedures. So as you're transitioning, maybe you're wiping down your desk and your chair, or if you're doing that upon entry, that will be taken care of. Movement, student arrival and departure from school. So how do students arrive? What do they do? Where do they go? How do we separate them? And the same thing takes place at the end of the day. Transitions to and from class periods. These are all considerations as students are moving throughout the building. We want to make sure that we've got them separated. Principals will need to create assigned seats for lunch to assist with contract tracing. Dr. Asplin and I spoke about that today, just so there's predictability, so we know who is sitting where at all times. And then manpower, consider the need for additional paraprofessional support. As we have more students coming into our buildings, we have greater needs for supervision and assistance with students. And then obviously substitutes to cover the potential teacher absences that we will incur, undoubtedly. So I've spoken a lot tonight, so I tried to be as fast as possible on that last part.
Well, and while you're thinking of questions, Dr. Mashad, can you come up and give the board just a very brief overview of our discussion today about how we would determine what students needed their one-on-one aids and things of that sort as we go forward, assuming the board approves this plan tonight?
Dr. Asplin, I have one question.
Yes.
What about substitutes? How are we doing?
We are currently still trying to recruit those that are willing to substitute. We've put substitutes on the vaccination list so that they can get vaccinated through our slots. And then we also are going to have to take more advantage this year, unfortunately, of in-house substitutes more than we normally do, just because we're going to have fewer substitutes available. So we're going to have to be a little bit more flexible in terms of what we're doing. Now, as we said before, we could also still be availing ourselves of, if a third grade teacher is going to be out for 10 days due to isolation, we might just move that class back into remote for a short amount of time, because that teacher could still teach them online at home. So we're still going to have to look at those individual situations. It's a little bit more cut and dried at the grade schools than it is at the 5th grade on up, because if you're at Lombard and one of your 7 teachers is gone, well, we're probably still going to have those kids come. We're just going to have to figure out what to do with that one period. So we're going to have to be really flexible and deal with fewer subs, but we're still trying to get more in, especially through the use of being able to make the vaccine available sooner to some folks because they can be on our list.
And to add to that, Mrs. Benson, our administrative assistant here in the board office, she has been encountering phone calls from people who are certified subs that are working for us, asking to make sure that they're on the list because they are ready to come back. So we have had some of that in the last week or two.
I don't know if there's differences in legality between states, why I'm looking over it, Luke. But I saw an interesting story out of Iowa where parents, now I'm looking at you, Facebook Live, parents who were eager for their children to be back in the classroom and schools experiencing lack of subs, signed up to be basically like classroom monitors for, so a teacher may have to isolate or quarantine, but their symptoms may not be such that they cannot teach. It's just they can't be in person, right? And so this particular school district went out and solicited parents to come in and actually be the physical presence because they didn't have enough subs, they didn't have enough paras to cover that. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to do it because we have to look at legal, we have to look at liability, we have to look at all that stuff. And I believe it's a volunteer program. But I just put it out there because we have a lot of eager parents who have a lot of ideas about their students being back in school. So I'm just going to toss that out as a possibility for community involvement in our schools.
Retired people, too.
Go ahead.
Okay, so for the February yes.
Second. If we're going to be reutilizing staff, could that possibly mean we might see Dr. Asplin substituting in a high school English class?
Ooh.
We might be.
Just a thought.
I like to teach kids to write, so I don't know if they'll ask me back. But
Okay. So, you sure?
Yep.
So for the February 1st start, we have identified that currently right now we have enough paraprofessionals on board in special ed realm to meet the need of all the students currently coming into the building for the AB/life skills comm room mix of schedules that we currently have based on the students that are coming in. So looking at the February 22nd projected all-in start, what we would do is if the board then determines that that is a go, we would then be contacting our families to find out, now that we would be 5 days, how many more students would then be included in coming back. Then what we could do, so we would rely on our case managers. All students have a case manager, so we'd sub-manage that down to contact the families on their list so that we had an accurate head count. Then, based on those numbers, we could go back to Dr. Asplin. We project we would have to recall some paraprofessionals to meet the individual and classroom needs of students. But then we would have a greater idea of the number. We also know that we have a handful of special ed students that, due to health concerns, severe health concerns, their parents would probably elect to keep them home also for the rest of the year. So we're prepared to do that. Two of the other areas that we're going to take a look at that would be a concern is a plan for timeout and restraints due to COVID. The state, over the last few years I've been reporting to you, has really cracked down on timeouts and physical restraints. And so I'll get with our team and we're going to develop some guidance to get out to teachers before that February 22nd in regards to a plan of action for dealing students who might have outbursts to try to minimize physical contact and maintain safety. And so when you only have a couple of ED students coming in, for example, emotional disability behavior students, you don't see the interactions and the friction that starts, and so we don't see as many problems. But when we start bringing back more students and you increase to 8, 9 kids in a classroom, that's when you start to see those. So we're going to come up with a plan to how to deal with that. And then also a plan for students with extreme behaviors. So if we do have those outliers that are severely physically aggressive, not following the rules, that way we can have guidance to teachers. So we'll be working on those to get those out as we increase numbers. Any questions? Thank you very much.
okay, Matt Davis will get up and talk about our food service plan.
Brief outline for y'all to follow along on, and obviously this outline pertains to a possibility of a full day schedule. It does not pertain to February 1st.
Can you talk first about what your plans are for February 1st?
I can go over that.
Thank you.
So I can start there. So February 1st, what will happen is every day that we are in person, so Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, every school will be distributing meals upon dismissal. So we'll have a system set up at every school where if you're walking or getting picked up, you will exit the building. Every building's a little bit different, and you will get your meal there. If you are a bus rider, you'll be exiting separately. The buses will be preloaded with meals. So you will receive, and this is to avoid hand-to-hand contact is basically where we're going with this. So if you're a bus rider, as you exit the bus, you will receive your meal. So that's how we will be doing it. On Wednesdays, when we are fully remote, and every day we will still be doing the 7:30 to 8:30 pickup. We'll still be doing the 11 to 12 pickup at all the elementaries, and then the activity bus will run every location. We're minimal at our stop times right now, but we are still running that activity bus. And then on Wednesdays, obviously, we'll just run the 11 to 12 at the elementary and the activity bus route, because that's the fully remote day. So obviously this looks a little bit different. Go ahead.
So on February 1st, this is going into place. Students are coming for the afternoon, and what time does that mean? What is that 3 hours segment?
Right, when will they leave?
Let's say...
Yeah, anywhere from 2:50 to 3:30 off the top of my head, I
They'll
believe.
be leaving?
Yeah.
So they go with basically a dinner with them.
Well, it's meant to be for the next day.
It's meant for the next day.
Yes, so a breakfast and a lunch for the next day before they come in the afternoon is how it's set up to be.
And those students who, then what do we do about Wednesday then? They have to pick up on Wednesday.
Yeah, they pick up on Wednesday, and there is a 7:30 to 8:30 option at GHS in the morning on those days.
Okay.
It's low participation. It's low participation.
But it did meet the need of some parents who said they didn't have
Sure.
another way to get there. So
Sure. And there's some flexibilities with the program right now, which is nice that the state's been flexible about that. But we would have, we were able to feed multiple children with one person picking up, which was convenient. We found that a lot at the at Hy-Vee there on Henderson Street. We found that happening a lot at that site, so that was good. To run over this with you, as far as breakfast, and please be aware that this all is, this is flexible right now, so it could all change depending on the amount of students actually coming back in person. At a specific school, managing 300 students in a cafeteria versus 500 or 600 is a different ballgame. So we will be flexible with that. Breakfast will be distributed at the end of the school day to be consumed the next day in all grade levels. It will be, so basically that distribution process is similar to the method starting on February 1st. So we will already have a distribution method for food in place starting February 1st, and we will just continue that rollout for breakfast for the next day. We felt with the amount of staff that we have on hand currently, the amount of time that we have to ramp it up, that was the best option for breakfast. Lunch will be distributed in the cafeteria area. It will be consumed during the lunch period. Once again, if we have 3 lunch lines at a school, and we have 100 kids running through each lunch line, it's very doable. If we have 200
then we need to look at some other options, and we can definitely do that. Mrs. Springer talked about opening up a gymnasium or open up hallways or whatnot, so we will be flexible with that. Extra safety measures as far as the plexiglass, social distancing, you know, the seating chart, so we can do contract tracing. Additional pickups will continue at GHS from 7:30 to 8:30. I have made note to bring into discussion, if we do, I personally feel if we do feel that, let's say, our in-person population is not that great and we feel like we're missing the ball as far as getting food to some of the remote students, then I would be open for discussion into opening up another site that would work for that pickup. Once again, we'd have to see what our population is going to be in person. Staffing. Additional staffing is going to be necessary. However, you know, that once again all depends on the amount of students that come back. Currently, right now, we are, with 6 food service employees, we are packing 12 to 1,400 meals. So it's a simple math process, but it's not as well because there's other things obviously that go into it. You know, that's one reason, you know, that we made the breakfast decision for, you know, with dismissal, with how they'll do that. If we would do like a breakfast in the classroom or something like we did last year, that's going to take a lot more staff and extra safety measures. So we're trying to keep it as safe as possible and work with basically what we have, but there is going to be some additional staff that need to be called back. I know it's very vague right now, but those are the ideas that we have in place. So I can try to answer any questions.
When the students are in the cafeterias eating, will they all be pre-bagged or plated?
Yeah. So you know, it's not how I foresee food service in the future, obviously. But yes, it's going to be very similar to what they're receiving now. There will not be. They will not go through a hot and cold line. We're obviously not doing salad bars. So yes, it will all be prepackaged the way it is, ready to go.
Any other questions?
Okay, Courtney Knuth is going to get up. Thank you, Matt. Courtney Knuth is going to get up and address overview of health services recommendations.
Hi, everybody. So one of the things that I'm going to be going over are the health services considerations for when we do come in full in person 5 days a week. We've hammered out a lot of the student and staff safety protocol. We are ready to go as far as supplies and everything this upcoming Monday. There will be additional supplies that will need to be ordered. Should more students, we need to be prepared as possible for anticipating full student in-person attendance, and so we're going to be ordering supplies to make sure that we're over-prepared rather than under-prepared. As far as protocol adherence, one of the things that have been brought up is transporting students who aren't picked up. If a student's symptomatic, they're sent to the designated quarantine area. We are unable to reach the parent. There's no way for the parent to transport the student back. It may be needed for outreach or a staff member to go make a home visit to that house, ensure there is somebody in that house. If transportation can absolutely not be provided to get that student home, we're looking into First Student providing a bus for us to bus that student and their siblings back to their house. But of course, we cannot make that a consistent everyday process. So there absolutely has to be parents' responsibility in this and adhering to our protocols and following them. So I absolutely, as the health services coordinator of school districts, it's my responsibility to make sure that students and staff are as safe as possible in the school district while students are getting their optimal academic experience. So that is going to continue to be my goal. That's going to continue to be what I do. But parents need to have that responsibility to following the guidelines that are in place to make sure that that can be followed through with. Part of that is going to be there will be a procedural agreement that parents will be receiving. It's going to be in the student and staff safety protocol, stating that if their student is not adhering to these protocols, then they may be going to remote learning. They may not have the option to attend in person. Students who are unable to wear a face mask, currently the guidance is if it's required for everybody to wear a face mask in the building. If they do provide a doctor's note, then they are able to wear a face shield in lieu of a face mask. However, there's a lengthy process that we have in place for that prior to that student even attending back in person. We need to notify everybody else in that classroom, everybody else on that bus, letting them know that there is an individual who does not have a face mask and they will be wearing a face shield in place. In case they do not feel comfortable sending their student, we need to make sure that they're as informed as possible on that. However, if a student does not adhere to wearing a face shield or a face mask, then they'll be given the 2 warnings, and then again, they'll be possibly up for going back full remote at that time. As far as contact tracing with passing periods, we've discussed this, and in order for you to be a close contact, you have to have that sustained close contact of within 6 feet for 15 or more minutes throughout a period of a day. With passing periods, with the amount of students that we have, we feel that that will not be an issue. That will be something that when I reach out to parents or the staff member who assists with the communication process, that we will be asking if they have any known students that they've interacted with and been in close contact with, because that may have been in school or it may have been in out of school as well. So we will be addressing that. Classroom, bus, and lunchtime exposures for students and staff. As mentioned, I believe Matt and Tiffany both mentioned this, but there will be assigned seating charts in essentially all areas, in the classroom, on the bus, and during the lunchtime. Plexiglass barriers will be provided. We're going to be ordering additional ones that kind of interlock with one another for tables that have more than one student sitting at in the elementary levels, some of the labs in the older levels, and then also for the lunchroom, cafeteria, the long tables. So then that way we are going to stagger, we're going to social distance, we're going to do everything as much as possible, but we'll have an additional barrier in there for when that face mask is down and students are eating. It will be expected when they are not eating and they aren't drinking that face mask then goes up, hand hygiene, and they follow all of those protocols. A separate location to move classrooms who have had a symptomatic person. So right now the building principals, they have an area designated in which if a classroom needs to be vacated for a little while until the disinfectant can occur, they have an area to do that. I'll be working with them to identify additional areas should there be a situation where there's more than one classroom that needs to be vacated at a time. As far as staff supervising students in the quarantine area, it's really important that we continue to provide the medical care that we've been blessed to be able to provide, having a nurse at every building through the district. So we need to continue to address and administer the medications as needed, tend to those medical emergencies. And so by all means, the nurse will be assessing those students who will be going into the quarantine area. But I have worked with Workforce Illinois. They've provided us with one LPN so far who does COVID-related tasks only. She assists with the communication process and also the designated quarantine areas. But I have worked with them to see we have not had a lot of interest in that position just because of the high need of nurses. So we're trying to open that up to CNAs and medical office assistants so they can assist with the communication process. They can assist with supervising those quarantine areas and communicating closely with the building nurses. So I'm hopeful that that will happen. In the event that that shouldn't happen, then we're looking into having paras supervise outside. If the students are stable, you're having the paras supervise via the window, having an eye on them at all times. Those are the health services considerations at this time for the full in-person learning. That doesn't encompass everything, but I do feel, I said at the very beginning meeting, I think when I first ever spoke to you guys, that I always err on the side of caution. I truly think that it's important to get the students into school, and I do think that we can do that as safe as possible, and I'm going to be pretty strict in adhering consistently to the procedures that are in place. So, any questions? Thank you.
Okay, finally, we have Mrs. Ham who's going to get up and talk about, primarily, we're going to talk about transportation, but some other logistical issues as well.
Okay, mine's going to be really quick. As Dr. Asplund said, we currently have 27 trained drivers. We are anticipating 34 routes, although we will not know that definite number until parents were to commit to the 5 days or virtual option. So once we get that information, which depending on what the board decides tonight, we hope to attain within a week, then we'll start the routing, and we'll be working closely with First Student. They've been great partners this year and done everything they possibly could for us, and they're training as quickly as they can, but once again, they are constrained by limited training opportunities. Does anyone have any questions for me? Mm-hmm.
What are you projecting as our cap on a bus? The state allows for up to 50, which I don't think is too high. So what are we putting as our cap, or are we accepting the 50?
So we're accepting the 50 at this point. We're trying to space students out as much as possible. We're going to be cracking windows following all of those guidelines. But unfortunately, the trade-off may be, if we can't get more drivers, that we may have to put more students on the bus, than we currently have. So we have some routes that are very small. Those numbers will need to increase, and our route times may increase as well in order to get students to school. But we can't really determine that at this time until we get students parents committed to the 5 days a week. Okay.
So that is, in a big nutshell, the plan that we have before you. As you heard many times, some of the finer points of the plan will be dependent on how many parents ultimately sign their children up for this plan, if you approve it to go forward. As I've said at the beginning, as new information comes along, we reserve the right to change our mind. We feel that this is the right thing to do at this time. I also would always counter any concern that anybody has with if the rates of infection go up, if new information comes back, we can always pull back and go into a full remote. We already know how to do that. We know that our staff has done a tremendous job of doing the best they can in a very trying environment. We're not going to sugarcoat it and say that the 5-day in-person is going to be perfect either. I mean, we know it's not. But we feel like we've tried to present as factual and as clear-minded a presentation as possible so people get an understanding of what it may look like as we move forward. So, obviously I welcome any questions or if we just want to discuss, but my strong recommendation is still that we move forward with implementing the half measure starting Monday with the transition process to rapidly moving into 5 days full in person with online option being available for parents, but those students would have to be online during the time that class is going on because we wouldn't ask teachers to teach twice to that population, so they'd have to know that going in.
So one question that I have in regards to that, right now, with the hybrid starting February 1st, I believe we did our best to communicate to parents that you can opt to be in person and then choose to go remote, but you can't necessarily choose to go remote and go in person because of all the moving pieces. How does that change after a full in-person in 22nd?
Thank you. So what we would offer parents is that this would be for the rest of the third quarter, that people could always opt in and then pull back out. So if they said that they started and they said that we were going to start in remote, they'd have to stay in remote because of those numbers for routing and things like that and food service. And, it's very dependent on knowing how many students, a maximum of how many students are in. So a parent can say that I'm going to send my children, and then after a week go, you know what, remote's working better, and they could pull their children out. They could absolutely do that, okay? But the converse is not true. If they said, I want to start remote, and they go, you know what, in person, well, you got to wait till fourth quarter. So when we hit about 3 weeks before fourth quarter, we would start with the surveying of the parents again to say, okay, who wants to come back fourth quarter? Because as we move farther into the year, it's going to get warmer. We can be outside more. Hopefully, people will start to get vaccinated. We can have different information to make a different decision starting fourth quarter. But the idea would be that we would commit to this 5 days in person as long as we could, and hopefully it would be the rest of the year, depending on what the virus is doing. Obviously, we always have to respond to that. But we would give parents an option now, and then an option before fourth quarter to make a different decision.
I have a question, Dr. Asplin. I received my vaccination last week, and I will be receiving a second vaccination in about 2 weeks. Is there a schedule where I consider our teachers to be essential workers of they're just essential in every way. Do we have a schedule in which these teachers will receive the vaccine?
The short answer is no. The longer answer is more nuanced than that. So I meet with the health department weekly. We met today again. Last week they were given 600 doses of vaccine. That fluctuates depending on the week, and there's not a formula. Like, they don't know how many they're going to get every week. And so this last week they got 600. We were told this morning that we didn't know when it would become available, and then shortly before this meeting we received an email saying that Hy-Vee had vaccines available at the clinic. So we sent that out immediately. Courtney did a great job of getting that out. So we do have staff that have signed up to get it. We have done everything we can do on our end to make sure that we have, given all the information to the health department so that when the time comes to sign people up in mass, they can do it. But we do not have a clear date of knowing when all of those people would be vaccinated. And if not for that information that we got right before this meeting, I would have told you nobody's getting vaccinated. But now there are a few. And so it's very much a fluid situation. And for people out there that are listening, we don't really have any control over that. We didn't get a vote. We don't have input. It's when we're given the time to get it, we get it. So we have done everything we can do to be ready to do so. And I'm not being critical at all of our health department. I mean, they prioritize people 65 and up. I can certainly understand why they did that. That's an important group of folks to protect. So, there's not one right answer. And I know they're overworked and taxed very, very hard with trying to find enough people to get the work done. So, as I said, the short answer is no, but we're doing everything we can to get people vaccinated when that opportunity arises.
Other questions or comments?
I do have a question. And I know it would create somewhat of a logistical headache, but one of my concerns has been the workload on faculty as we try to navigate and balance both remote and in person. And obviously we have some constraints with trying to have faculty work in a remote setting and then tell other faculty that they need to come to a classroom. Right? Is there any way to have faculty overseeing the students that choose to stay in a remote setting, although they are still reporting to a building, even though it may require reassigning students, or would that be too troublesome to the relationships that have already been developed up to this point?
I think that would be part of the answer. It would be a little bit problematic to try to get that logistically worked out. We're lucky enough to have Luke Feeney here, so I'll give Luke the opportunity to give the legal reasons why that's somewhat of a challenge.
The short answer is you may be able to do some of that. I certainly am not going to comment on any individual cases on why somebody might not be able to physically return to work, but there is practically a balancing element of, within the contract you can move people around, but whether it's a good idea to pull a classroom teacher out who already has a base relationship to then, have moving pieces is something the administration will have to weigh. But there is some latitude within the contract to move people subject to the terms of the CBA.
Thank you. My other question, obviously there were some protections that were afforded to employees in many different organizations up until 12/31/2020. What options do employees have? And I know this isn't student focused, but I know these are some concerns that individuals have.
Sure. Well, the GEA what are some other options staff have? So, like for advanced sick days. So, we negotiated with the GEA. There are certain circumstances where people could avail themselves of a sick bank, expanded sick bank, depending on certain circumstances in their situation. We've looked at and we've been working not only with our local, but with the UNISERV director as well. I had a conversation with her on Saturday about language we could put together to make sure we protected those people that were truly vulnerable, versus just kind of opening the door for people. I mean, that's obviously going to be a problem, to just make it open to anybody. We believe there's language available within our current agreement to be able to cover those people that need to have, we know of 3 or 4 that have very specific issues that we need to protect them, and I feel that we have that ability
now. We all have received letters from community members, and some of them said, stay home, how can you do this? And others really want their kids in school. And as I've listened and read the exact words and read between lines, it appears that there's a lot of families that really want their kids in school right now. And I think, if we are doing things to protect our children, we're doing things to protect the adults, and I think it's incumbent upon us to bring kids back to school with the protections that we have in place, and if things change, we'll respond. I have in front of me a map now that shows the whole country in terms of spread and things, and hopefully the trajectory in Knox County and the whole country continues where it's going right now, and which is good. But of course we can't depend on that. So I guess what I'm saying, sitting here today, I will support the actions of our administration to try to make those graphs we saw today not go the direction they're going, and try to prevent it from getting worse.
Other comments? So when we go back to this 5-day, or go to the 5-day thing, before we talked about teachers not being able to use their cameras while they're teaching, like have a Zoom basically, and the kids online be watching the teacher. Has that changed? Is that okay now?
We have to have a very narrow, you can't have it just where it's open Zoom and do that. What we want to do is have the camera looking at the teacher,
right,
and the other students aren't available.
So like this, and the kids would be over here. Right.
Yep.
But she could still, she probably, whatever. We can make it work to where the kids at home could still watch the teacher teach the lesson.
There were 2 main issues, and one was a legal issue in terms of recording Zooms and how that was done with the students. And then we feel like we've got that resolved. So just pointing the camera at the teacher. And second of all was an issue of microphones and making sure that everybody could hear, so that the teachers wasn't chained to one spot.
Right.
So we purchased omnidirectional microphones so that when there are issues where the teacher might have a voice carrying problem, I don't have that problem, but other people do. So we can give them omnidirectional microphones so that anybody can hear what's going on. So we feel like those issues have been, it's not going to be perfect.
Right.
We know that, but we feel like it's as best as it's going to be with students.
But in that way, I feel is that the at-home kids are still getting the chance to get that live instruction when we do go to the 5 days a week. So then the teachers still are being able to still teach those kids online, and they're not figuring it out. It's 3:15 and I still have to teach my kids that are home.
And that's the big issue, right? We never wanted to put teachers in a situation where, just what you said, where, okay, I'm done with my in-person, now
exactly.
I got to go to my remote. No, you teach everybody at the same time. There are some limitations of that. We're going to be and have been very transparent with the parents who are electing to keep their kids home. We respect that. We honor that. We just want to make sure that they understand you know, it's not going to be like traditional school. I mean, it's going to be as close as we can make it. But, you know, they'll follow a schedule. But they, you know, people that want to opt for that option, we'll certainly make that available to them. But they just have to know that, you know, our teachers are going to be teaching to the class there and also responding to their children
Right.
online when they can.
Right. I will say that the charts that we got earlier today in the presentation by Tiffany, it was sad to see that our numbers are so low, but I feel like it's very disheartening to the teachers as well, because they're putting time and more time into this, and it's...
Well, but I think also, to be fair, I mean, the charts did show that our teachers are having an impact. It's just there's such a distance. You know,
Right.
Our teachers are doing a good job. It's just that the format is making it difficult to have the complete impact that we believe they could have if people were in person. You know,
I
so
agree.
I want to be clear. We are not pointing at saying, hey, our teachers. No, I mean, it showed growth. It's just we feel that format, especially when you're looking at that first grade level. So those children went through, the end of February in kindergarten, and then they've been out since then. So, I mean, it's not surprising that group of kids has a big gap, because they were in a very early learning mode. So we're really in a big hurry to get those folks back. And that's why when we started the in-person back in the fall, that was the group of kids that we identified first. I mean, it's a very consistent evidentiary approach in terms of how we've tried to see who needs to come back to school.
Right. Other comments?
Okay. I believe you've demonstrated that there's definitely a need for students to be back in the classroom. And furthermore, you've also demonstrated that, you know, you have a very detailed plan on what we're going to do to keep these students and staff safe. And I believe there's going to be things that come up. You know, certainly there will be, and we'll address them, you know, as they come up, and I believe that can happen. I'm absolutely for bringing the students back in school. I believe it's time for them to be back. This is going to be the first time for many of these students to even be in their buildings. You know, the first time they actually get to meet their teachers. You know, the first time they get to meet their, you know, some of their peers. And I'm excited for that. And I'm excited that the stats are on a downward trend. Hopefully they stay that way. I'm excited to hear that vaccinations are on, you know, soon to be had. You know, although we don't have specific dates, I'm glad that they're right there. And for those reasons, I would absolutely support your plan.
Other comments?
I know I spoke before. I had a couple questions, obviously. But just some general comments. I did have some concerns at the last meeting. I do like the integration of both the in-person as well as the remote learning involving both of them. I have always said that I want it to be a worthwhile and meaningful experience for the kids coming back. I did not think that 1 hour twice a week was it. And I have some concerns that 3 hours twice a week is it as well. I do think the full 5 days is it. I just don't think, I would love to see that on 2-1. I don't think that we can pull that off. I'm not naive.
I know we
right?
can't.
So I do think that 2-1 is a stepping stone to getting there. My concern, and hopefully we can navigate it successfully, is not losing the kids that are doing well that choose to stay remote, as well as I hope that the kids that ultimately do need the help get the help, that they're the ones that either come back and get the help they need, or we identify them in another way and they're getting the help one-on-one in a remote setting.
So I would like to echo everything that's been said. I wasn't ready for this day, but I knew this day would come I didn't, with the numbers we saw, I just had this feeling, and I was watching my own two girls, and it's time. And I applaud everyone that has worked on this. We've been presented with facts and figures and procedures that tells me we can do this, and it's time. Our kids deserve it, our families deserve it, we all deserve it, and I applaud every one of you for arming us with to be able to make our opinions and our decisions very well informed, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Member Lyon is looking at me. Well, you know, one of my roles is to make sure everyone's had an opportunity to speak. So of course I have thoughts. I too had expressed some concern at a regular scheduled board meeting earlier this month about what we were doing, how we were doing it, and how we were going to impact students, because that's what we're here for, right? At the end of the day, we're here for our students. By now, sitting at this table, most people in this room, in this community, also know that I tend to operate on a glass half empty kind of philosophy. It is who I am. I embrace it. So, what I'm going to share now, and I'm going to look directly. I'm glad you are sitting right there, Steve, because I'm talking to everyone who's still listening on Facebook. Oh, there's lots of people listening. It is extremely disappointing to see the way that our community has engaged in this conversation. Everyone has a reason for why they want their students in their classroom or why they believe it's safer to have their students stay at home. And we are not anyone to tell anyone else that their reason is invalid. Our job, in addition to educating, is to making sure that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that our children are being educated in a safe environment. Period. And we had to make decisions based on that premise, with the knowledge and the data that we had at any given point that we've had this conversation. To see people online bashing other people because of their fear or their concern is astonishing to me. What I hope should come of this time is from our community and our families a better appreciation for what our educators actually do on a day-to-day basis. They're not just teaching your children math facts and how to read. They provide stability. They provide support. They're teaching them life skills. They're your children's cheerleader. They're your students' advocate. And they've worked really hard during this time to do the best that they can in the environment that we've been given. I would also hope that we have a better appreciation for the different challenges that our families face during this time. We're long past the point of a standard family composition. Families mean all kinds of things in today's day and age. We work a variety of different jobs at a variety of different hours. And this hasn't always been the best situation for some of our families. That does not mean that those parents and those children do not care about their education. They're doing the best that they can as well. That should actually be the lessons that are coming out of this. I appreciate all of the work that has gone into creating this plan. And based on the numbers and the data that we've received, it is important that we get our students back into the building. But this is not going back to business as normal. Right? We're bringing our students back. There is going to have to be an accountability and a responsibility out of every individual that is in the building, that is opting to send their student to school, because this is not an individualistic decision. This is not just about you. It is about the entire community in our buildings. And what you do and what you choose to do, what you choose to be honest about in following the guidelines, in coming to school, in helping to hold your children and your students accountable to what the expectations are once they're in the buildings under these guidelines, impacts lives. I said at the beginning of January's meeting, or at the beginning of our discussion in January, that I don't trust people. And it's unfortunate. But there's too many people who are currently operating off of their own opinion or their own, I don't want to do that kind of ethos. And this isn't about you. This is about our entire community. Yes, our numbers are trending down. Yes, we have vaccines, but this thing has not disappeared. And the only way we're going to be able to keep those things moving in that downward trajectory is if we are all doing our part. Every single one of us. And I'll say on the record right now, I'm fine if it's kids don't want to wear a mask. They don't want to follow the rule. Call in a parent and they're going to go remote. This isn't about whether you believe this is just like the flu or whether you believe that this is going away, because the reality is, for too many people, it may not be. Period. So this is not about your personal opinion. You want your students back in the classrooms. Teachers want the students back in the classrooms. Data shows us that the students have to be back in the classrooms. In order to make that work, you have to do your part. Period. Okay. Next item on the agenda.
Are we voting on this?
That's what the next item is. Thank you, Member Lyon. Do I have a motion to consider approval on the status of e-learning and in-person learning?
Yeah, so you're voting on, we're implementing the first step February 1st, and then we're the 5-day plan. And just so we're clear, the goal is February 22nd, but it's dependent on transportation. So we're going to... Will we know more about that at our February board meeting? Yes, you absolutely will. But yeah, this just gives us permission to pursue that goal and to continue to go forward to try to get the yes.
All right, Allison?
Aye.
Walter? Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
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 All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Pick one.
Allison?
Rodney and Courtney.
Aye.